welcome to episode 12 of the Behind the Beacon podcast. I'm your host, Seth Dorensky. This will be the final episode of the semester, and I hope everyone has enjoyed learning some of the stories of our Beacon student athletes, alumni, and staff. Finally, I want to take a moment to congratulate all of our student athletes on finishing up what has been a long but productive fall semester. Enjoy your time away from classes and finals, and be safe. Our first guest this week is men's soccer and track and field alum Reyn Johnson. Reyn put together one of the most impressive athletic resumes for UMass Boston student athlete prior to entering college that I can remember. Growing up on the island of Guam in the South Pacific, Reyn was a member of 2 teams that made it to the Little League World Series, was a standout in volleyball and basketball, and a member of the Guam national soccer team. Reyn and I discussed what it meant for him to play for the Guam national team, why he chose to attend UMass Boston, and how he came to be studying to be a chiropractor. I'm joined by UMass Boston men's soccer alum Reyn Johnson. Reyn, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing great. Reyn, you have a phenomenal story from well before you even started at UMass Boston. It all starts on the island of Guam in the Pacific Ocean. You grew up in Manilo, a town of about 15,000. What was it like living in a place that's so diverse and has so many different things going on?
Amazing experience. I mean, just growing up, a very small town, just a very, very small town community, and then being afforded the opportunities that we are able to do, just with sports, most especially, and just being so close in Asia with, the influence from all the cultures and around the world. Yeah.
You talk about some of your sports experience. I want to start not with soccer, but with baseball. You made it to not 1, but 2 Little League World Series. What was that experience like?
I mean, just competing at that level in itself is just a humbling experience, and you're kind of thrown into the mix as an 11 and 12-year-old, just being on camera, being on ESPN. I think that I had a play that was on SportsCenter top 10 plays, and it just to kind of see that and be a part of that is a humbling experience in itself. They really treat you like a professional athlete, and I think that's something that's I don't think health happens elsewhere in the world on that scale. And people come out and people watch it. I mean, it's still a highly watched event, and just to be a part of that and be a part of that twice is truly unique.
You went from performing on an international stage in baseball to doing it in soccer. You played for the U14, U16, U17, and U19 team for Guam when the program was really developing. You guys started and the team really was taking some tough losses and then progressed, and you started to see some better results. What was that process like, coming up playing for a national team where obviously there's a lot of pride, but there's also some expectations as you guys get better?
Absolutely. I mean, being 14, 15 years old and getting defeated 12-0 by Japan and Korea, it's tough. It's tough to swallow those losses and, also say that you're part of a national team. But, slowly we started to improve, players started going off island training, coming back, bringing those skills back to us. And as we were younger and growing up, and we saw how good we were. It was we just kind of had a lack of direction, lack of leadership. And it slowly improved over time. So now we're really competing on the men's side.
One of the reasons that the team was able to succeed is they started bringing in players who weren't born on Guam, hadn't trained on Guam, but came from other places. I've seen the same thing with the U.S. men's national team, where bringing in a lot of internationals to try to get better. What was that like as a player who was born on Guam, who had trained? How do you kind of come to terms with that? And how did that eventually kind of help the entire team get better as you guys built that chemistry?
It's tough. I mean, you hear players coming in from the U.S. national team. They made the U.S. national team pool, and they come in. They didn't make the full side, so they look for other options. And Guam, a couple players, that was an option. And come in, you see how they play. They're good. I mean, they can ball, but you just kind of have to step up. And oftentimes we did, and we competed with them, and they became great friends. But we pushed each other in that regard. And it was kind of a sense of pride by, we grew up on Guam, we're representing our island, and they're coming in and trying to represent it as well. But in the end, it really benefited the Guam program. And I think we all became better for it.
Eventually you graduated the youth teams and made it to the actual Guam national team. I think you had about 10 caps with the team. What was that like to play in an international tournament with your country on the front of the jersey and playing against some really big named countries and in some really stadiums where people absolutely love the sport and are rooting on either against you or for you?
I remember, being in the locker rooms in the tunnels and in the stadiums and just feeling the beat of the drums in my chest. Just, you have that. We don't get that in Guam, obviously, but it's such a small island. You go to countries where that football is life, soccer is life there, and to be a part of that, and then to walk out of the tunnel with the FIFA anthem playing, and then your national anthem playing, and just you have this overwhelming sense of pride and passion for the game. There's no way to explain it other than it's just that's what loving your sport is. I think that's the epitome of it. It's just playing for something way bigger than yourself, and it was an experience that I'll never forget. Thankful that I had those 10 caps.
You clearly have so much love for the island of Guam and for the people of Guam. Yet when it came to choosing a school, you went about as far as you possibly could in the world. Why UMass Boston?
I mean, Boston in itself, I loved, the city. It's such an amazing, unique city, especially with sports. I mean, I've always been a big fan of sports, hockey. We don't have much hockey where I'm from, but it's my favorite sport by far. So, finding out that there's a UMass, I was looking at UMass Amherst and there's UMass Boston, and got to speak with Coach Miles Berry, and, spoke to the guys, the upperclassmen, and some of them I'm still good friends with today. Kind of just they showed me what the UMass community is all about, and I'm happy I made the decision.
What was that transition like soccer wise? The difference between how the game was played or how the game was practiced in Guam versus coming in to UMass Boston, playing with a different group of players from a very different part of the world?
I think it was super unique just because we have in Guam we have a really Japanese or Asian type of football. So we were a lot of passing, where you come to the US and it's very much so long balls and running on balls. So it was definitely a lot to get used to. I think our team was made up of a lot of South American people, so we had a lot of ball handlers, which back where I'm from, if you ball handle, you're going to get laid out. So it was pretty interesting to see, and it was a total different side of soccer that I had ever experienced. So it took some getting used to. I think I was a little bit shaken at first. I was just trying to figure out the way of the land, but it ended up being great.
After you graduated UMass Boston, you kind of bounced around. You studied exercise health science while on campus, but post-college, you went back to Guam and worked as a lab technician. Then you came back to the States, worked in sales, physical therapy, real estate. And now it seems like you've kind of found that path. You're about 3/4 of the way through chiropractor school out in Oregon. What was that path like? And why do you think it helped you find the right answer in the end?
I mean, if you look at my sports career, I've always been someone who has just loved to try new things. I'm kind of all over the place with, volleyball, soccer, and, the other sports that I played. In looking at my career, I stepped away from soccer actually to explore what I was going to do for the rest of my life. And I looked into real estate, and looked into sales, and I always found myself gravitating back towards healthcare and, providing care for others. And I think that physical therapy, it connected with me, but not in the way that I wanted to make it my career. Then I moved to Oregon and found chiropractic, and it was kind of, I just stumbled upon it, and I've slowly found that it's not just the rack and crack kind of stuff that you see on YouTube. It's really very much so of a relationship that you build with the patient. You look at what are their goals, what are they looking to get out of their musculoskeletal ailment, and you work with them towards that, and you give them the tools necessary so they can prolong a pain-free and functionally sound way of life. So it really stuck out to me, and I went with it. And it's tough. I mean, it's a 3-year full-time program, and you come out with a doctorate, and they do offer masters as well, but I'm glad I made a decision, and I think that I'm in the right spot.
Reyn, I got one last question for you, and this is typically the hardest question. can you pick one teammate who really made a lasting impression on you during your time at UMass Boston?
Absolutely. Bryson Dowd, without a doubt. To see what he went through his senior year of college, to breaking his thumb, and then him, that's tough. That's tough for a senior because he was the captain, he's a senior, and he's a goalie. So he couldn't play his position, but I saw him go, I think it was against UMass Dartmouth. He scored a game winner, and just to see the pure joy, I couldn't even celebrate because it's just to see that, the reaction out of him, the passion out of him. And it carried through each and every one of our teammates. So that 100% Bryson Dowd.
Perfect. Thanks so much for your time. Thanks so much for your input. And we really appreciate it, Reyn.
Absolutely. Thank you.
That was my interview with Reyn Johnson. Despite playing as a back for the Beacons, Reyn sits tied for 20th in program history with his 41 career points. He currently has 3 quarters left in his chiropractic program at the University of Western States in Portland, Oregon. Before we get to our next interview, I'd like to dig a little deeper on one of the On This Date posts from the past few weeks. On December 9, 2006, first-year men's hockey head coach Peter Belisle guided the Beacons to a 2-0 win over Becker College. The victory was a long time coming for the program. It snapped a 36-game winless streak that saw the Beacons go 0-32-4 over the course of almost a season and a half. Belisle inherited a Beacons team that hadn't won a game since February 12, 2004, and led the Beacons to a 5-20-1 season in his first year as a collegiate head coach. In their 7th game of the season, Cody Austin scored 71 seconds into the contest, and Jake Carlson added a goal 142 into the third to lead the Beacons past Becker. In net, Hall of Fame goaltender Ryan Donovan made 29 saves to earn his first collegiate victory. Now let's turn to our second guest. Women's hockey alum Moe Bradley's resume reads like someone who's been working in higher ed for decades rather than just 5 years. Since graduating UMass Boston in 2015, she has earned 2 master's degrees and worked at 6 different schools in a variety of positions. Moe and I talked about how she's been able to combine working in academic services with her passion for hockey, how she's learned on the job at Boston College, and why she's so willing to give back. I'm joined by UMass Boston women's hockey alum Moe Bradley. Moe, how are you doing this morning?
I'm good, Seth. How are you?
I'm doing great. Moe, it's really impressive when you look at your resume, all the different schools that you've been at in the last 5 years. Stevenson, Suffolk, UMass Boston, Boston College, Norwich, and even a little bit of love for Curry College now. You've only been out of school for 5 years. How have you kind of been able to manage that, and what have you taken away from getting to all these different schools and working with a lot of very different college populations?
Yeah, Stevenson was essential to starting me off. I knew if I wanted to, I wasn't sure what I was going to do with a bachelor's in communication, first off. And I didn't know how I could become a coach if I wanted to become a coach without having my master's. So there were 2 things that Stevenson did for me, was that it gave me some breathing room to figure out if I wanted a career in communications or just get me a master's in the meantime so I can be a better applicant when I do figure out what I want to do. But it also gave me the experience of coaching, which was another avenue that I could. So Stevenson really gave me breathing room to figure out what I wanted to do, giving me both a master's and applicable hockey coaching. Suffolk was similar, but Suffolk was almost reactive to figuring out that I didn't want to work downtown Boston in the tech industry. I was figuring out I probably wanted to go back and become like Mary Beth Manine. And a lot of those jobs were higher ed specific. So I needed a degree in that. So I found Suffolk. They were also starting a hockey program at the same time. So I've been told never get a master's without having a grad assistant job because it helps with tuition, which is true. I suggest that to anyone else. And so I found another grad assistant position at Suffolk. So that's how those 2 came together.
You've kind of been split into 2 different categories with all these jobs. It's either working with students in the academic realm or working with students on the ice. Let's start with the academic realm. You've held different positions at Suffolk, UMass Boston, Boston College, and now you work at Norwich University in their online college. What were you able to take away from those first 3 positions? Were you working entirely with student athlete populations that kind of gave you a better idea for this current position that you recently took at Norwich University?
Believe it or not, Suffolk, UMass Boston, and BC all were happening simultaneously because I was a grad student at Suffolk at the time. So part of my grad assistantship at Suffolk was to be the academic support for the student athletes there. So that was like my role alongside hockey. So that was built into the Suffolk education. And then UMass Boston, Mary Beth reached out and asked if I would want to come in and help, which of course I said yes. She was my idol. I want to be her still. So that happened, and she was able to let me come in part-time because it helped with my cash flow at the time. I was a grad student, but it also helped because she was the reason I was pursuing this degree anyways. And then BC was a 150-hour practicum experience that was required through Suffolk. So my last year of Suffolk, I had to do 2 sets of 150-hour practicum experiences. And I was able to do that at BC because I was the goalie coach there and was connected to the academic department. So super easy to be able to work and then pop on the ice.
With that, so you're working those 3 jobs, and then you're looking for that full-time job. You've graduated Suffolk, and you're looking at all these other different positions. Why Norwich, and specifically why Norwich's online college?
It allowed me to be home. I didn't have to give up BC. I was able to be near my family, which is all in Massachusetts. It allows me to keep my hockey hub here. The students are majority military or adult learners, both of which are fantastic populations, very similar to student athletes in terms of their accountability and their intention to complete their degrees. It's less students coming through with zero plan. They usually have a plan and a purpose.
You started at Norwich before the pandemic started, so you had a pretty good idea of what working with online students was and working remotely. How, if anything, has that position changed during the pandemic?
We almost had to hold the weight of Norwich on our shoulders this year, which was so interesting. So the Norwich college I worked for was still Norwich, but under President Schneider, it was a separate college. Now under President Anarumo, we're all one Norwich, which is great. So we have a lot of campus students popping into our classes right now. Students in general are taking more classes than usual. My day-to-day has not changed. Like you said, I've been doing this since May of 2019 before the pandemic. So this was not something that we adjusted to, but we're definitely adjusting to more students in our courses because so many people are using this time to educate themselves, which I'm all for.
On the flip side, you've been working on the academic side, but also working a lot in the college hockey world. You started at Stevenson when you were a GA, you moved on to Suffolk, and then through an Instagram message, you ended up at Boston College, one of the premier Division I women's hockey programs in the country. Can you talk about how you got that job? Because it's not every day that a Division I school comes calling, especially through social media.
Yeah. I had worked with Katie King at a few camps back when I was a college athlete at UMass Boston, actually. And we just had great communication and flow on ice. She always trusted I would take care of the goalies. I trusted her to take care of the rest of all of the children. Very compatible people. I loved her off the ice, on the ice. And then when in 2018, she messaged me on Instagram asking if I would have any interest in working with their goalies. And of course, how could you say no? And here we are 3 seasons later.
You talk about 3 seasons later, you probably came in as a first-year goalie coach at the worst possible time. BC graduates. Katie Burt, who, if you're not familiar with women's hockey, was probably the best goalie in the country, and you inherit 2 freshman goalies. What was that process like, dealing with the bumps as not only a first-year coach with a premier program, but also with a pair of goalies who were struggling themselves and a lot of expectations on all 3 of you?
Yeah, that was a crazy year. We had 5 players that returned from the 2018 Olympics who had just won gold. So the forward and defensive area of our team was as best as you can get. I mean, you just can't make that up. But on our goaltending end, we had 2 brand new wet behind the ears freshmen. So my job was to keep them motivated to play and give their hardest every single time they were on the ice. The girls in front of them had the same goal. Of course, we thought we could win and probably should have, and we didn't. The seasons before, I think they may have lost 2 games cumulatively in 2 seasons, like 80-2. And maybe their one loss was in the national championship game. So yeah, it was a lot of pressure. We've been able to, we've proudly retained every goalie that has come through. We still play them. If you look at our season this year, we now have four junior goalies. We've added a few, but the 2 that were there that freshman year have developed beyond measure. Most importantly, that their core human being has developed. They've made it through some of our toughest times, and they're leading us through some of what I hope will be our best.
So often from a sports story perspective, we focus on the student athlete themselves and the struggles they're going through. But you had a unique role where you're the person who's supposed to be coaching up these student athletes and having them succeed. How was that on you mentally? I mean, this is a side position for you. It's not your full-time job, but it's something that I'm sure as a former student athlete and as a coach, you really care about. You're putting a lot of energy into, and seeing those early struggles. How did you kind of manage that mentally?
I had to find success in things that weren't wins. There were girls that needed to develop in certain areas. There were players that had to develop in others. I had to make sense of all of it. And the best way I know how to make sense of things is to talk and work through them. I was by no means an elite goalie coach that first year. I think I'm better now, but it's only because I had those challenges back then. So without that year growing, figuring things out, I mean, we had to sit down and talk and figure out goaltending together. I had been working with Stop It for a year. And when I was at Stevenson, I was an assistant coach, not really a goalie coach. So I was not an elite goalie coach. So there was more mental commitment to that development than I think I planned. How I worked through it was very, very much so due to Kinger, the head coach, being, okay, nope, we're going to figure it out. Let's talk through it. She never blamed me once. Everything, and this is the way BC hockey is we are a team. This is not one. This is not the other. And that's true. We've been able to, like I said, retain these goalies, not have anyone quit, and actually get better because we all just sat down and said, we got to deal with this. Like, we just have to grow some roots, stand in the rain, deal with this. You're not going to go anywhere by jumping ship. So we've been able to really develop some good character and really good athletes in the meantime.
Well, this is year 3 for you at BC, and I imagine it's been a little bit different than the first 2 because of the pandemic. How has that position been different? How has that been different from a coaching perspective, from a practice perspective?
It's certainly been a different year. We have 4 goalies this year. All of them are juniors. COVID has been crazy, so we're getting tested 3 days a week. Our games are very limited. We've become very close because we have to be, and we're all we really have. But yeah, it's been an excellent year. We've played 8 games. I think we're 5-3. We've used 3 out of our 4 goalies already in different capacities. And yeah, everyone's growing and learning. It's been really fun.
So you're having all this success with BC. It seems like you're pretty busy. And yet last month it comes out, I think it's actually earlier this month, it comes out that you just got hired to be a new assistant coach at a brand new hockey program at Curry College. Why? Mm-hmm. What motivated you to work for Curry?
I was working BC and Suffolk in the same year back in 2018-19. It didn't stress me out. I'm very much so like my father, where my 9 to 5 is what it is. For him, it's a little different, but we keep our passions when we can. BC is, again, a couple days a week. Curry will be a couple days a week. And I'm able to do both because they're both local. Thankfully, again, like Norwich, I'm living here, I'm in Weymouth, but I'm within striking distance of Milton and Newton, Chestnut Hill. So their practice times are different. Of course, at Curry, we don't have a team this year, so it's nothing much other than recruiting, and no one's going to rinks to recruit right now anyway. So it's a lot of video and phone calls. So again, it doesn't, I don't feel exerted. Like hockey to me is the passion that I have. So any of my extra, what other people would consider extra for me is like what motivates me and is fun and is my better part of the day. Not that Norwich isn't, it's just my 9 to 5. I do it all the time. Hockey excites me. It keeps me happy. Again, it just does not feel like extra. It just feels more fun. And yeah, it's these players and the opportunities are just awesome. It's in both positions, thankfully, are not full time. It's hardly part time on both ends. So it's very doable.
I'm glad that you brought up your dad. Your dad actually used to work at Norwich as a team doctor for the athletics department. Dad's a doctor. Your mom works at a hospital and your brother's in the military. Was there a sense within your family of giving back, of really giving yourself to others? Or is that just something that you've kind of come to a different way? Why do you think everybody in your family is so service oriented or focused on giving back?
I really enjoy this question. Like, I don't know. My dad is definitely like, through him, I've been able to see both his passions and his career simultaneously. So this has never, for me, this is why I'm like, I like my resume when I applied to Norwich was like, I am a hybrid higher ed professional. Like I am a hockey coach, but I am also administrative. I can do both. And I like to do both. I don't feel stressed out doing both. They work two very different parts of my brain and I felt incomplete without them. And I think that's, I can speak for my family when they say that, when they operate too. I feel like they have purpose through service as well. So it's very interesting that you bring it up because I've really not noticed it until you asked.
Who was your favorite teammate during your 2 years at UMass Boston? Who made the most impact on you, or who was the person who really just kind of made your life the easiest?
Oh God. I have to say Berkey. Like I just have to because she was my goalie partner and like no matter what, physically, like when I was an absolute gong show and could not stop a bowling ball, like Berkey would go in and just put it up for us. And then off the ice, how could you not love being around her? She's just a blast. I also have to give a quick shout out to Kelsey too, because there was a time where I was having eye issues. She had a stress fracture. So she's driving me in a cast to my eye doctor appointment. The two of us were such a mess. So yeah, they just, UMass Boston's a special place. That team is family first. Even this week, we heard some crazy news and the way everyone responds is just unbelievable. So yeah, it's a good group. You can't go wrong, but yeah, shout out to Burke.
Thanks so much for your time, Moe. Good luck with your future. Obviously, you've got some time to make some decisions, but I really enjoyed catching up and hearing your story.
Thanks, Seth. I appreciate it.
Bradley is in her third season as the goalie coach for Boston College women's hockey. The Eagles are currently ranked 8th in the country, including a win over former Beacons women's hockey head coach Lindsey Berman's Northeastern University Huskies in their last time out. You can follow along all season with the Eagles on bceagles.com. That's all for episode 12 of the Behind the Beacon podcast. Thanks so much for following along all fall semester, and we hope you have a great and safe holiday season.